Hello. Right then, going to continue with this little series on medical English and particularly focusing on the microscopically small. Very, very small, invisible, too small to see. Okay, then now we know that cleanliness is very important. We get that message all the time these days. And we know this now. It's obvious. We don't think about it. We know it's important to wash our hands regularly and well. We know there are germs. We have to clean our hands to kill the germs. Germs may harm us, so it's very important to keep our hands clean. Cleanliness is very important. Now, how long have we known about germs? That's an interesting question, maybe. Actually, you could say not very long. In terms of our history, we haven't really known about germs for very long. Cleanliness. You could say that the importance of cleanliness has not always been well understood. So even doctors didn't understand the importance of cleanliness. Now here's an interesting story, I think. This is a guy called Ignaz Semmelweiss. He was a doctor, he was a Hungarian doctor, and he lived through the middle years of the 19th century, 1818 to 1865. Now, Semmelweis is interesting because he noticed something. He noticed something that other people didn't really notice. And of course, it's important to notice things. He noticed that many women were dying, and in particular, he noticed many women were dying in hospital. He worked in a hospital, and he looked around and he noticed many women were dying. And in particular, he noticed that they were dying during childbirth. So they come into the hospital to have babies, and they die during childbirth. And he noticed that the reason they were dying during childbirth was that doctors were not washing their hands properly, not washing generally properly, but particularly their hands. Now what was happening was that the doctors very often were examining dead patients in the morning, for example. And then after that, they'd be going to treat women who were having babies. So doctors examined dead patients, then they delivered babies. And they weren't washing their hands. And what Semmelweis did was he introduced a system of hand washing. Very simple, right? He just used the best available soaps and cleaners to kill, the dirt, because he wasn't really talking about germs as such, but basically to be clean. So he introduced a system of hand washing, a kind of antiseptic hand washing, trying to kill the bacteria. So Semmelweis introduced a system of antiseptic hand washing in 1847. So this was kind of a new idea. Semmelweis introduced a system of antiseptic hand washing for doctors who had been examining dead patients earlier in the day. You know, we think, well, examining dead pets, of course you have to wash your hands. But they weren't doing it then. It's not that long ago, really. 19th century, middle of the 19th century. It's kind of amazing. And what happened? So, you know, Semmelweis introduced a system, new system, antiseptic hand washing, cleaning your hands, just basically washing your hands well. For doctors who had been examining dead patients earlier in the day. So what happened? What do you think happened? Well, the number of women dying in childbirth dropped a lot. In other words, the situation improved a lot. Far more women survived than previously. So the number of women dying in childbirth dropped very significantly. Of course, I mean, for us today, we know that. Of course, the number of women dying in childbirth would drop. You know, if you just wash your hands after you've been examining dead patients, well, of course, we know that. But the doctors didn't know that. Okay, but anyway, he introduced a system of antiseptic hand washing for doctors who had been examining dead patients earlier in the day, and the number of women dying in childbirth dropped a lot. Okay, so what happened next? Think about it. What happened next? So Semmelweis noticed something simple and important. You have to wash your hands. Keep your hands clean. Keep clean. Kill the germs on your hands, and, you know, it'll improve the situation. So Semmelweis noticed something really simple and important. Other people weren't doing it. So what happened? He won the Nobel Prize. He won the Nobel Prize? No, he didn't. No, he didn't win the Nobel Prize. Okay? He didn't win the Nobel Prize. What happened? Now, this is kind of shocking. Doctors didn't believe it. So Semmelweis is saying, wash your hands, keep clean. Far fewer women will die. Doctors didn't believe it. They thought infections were caused by bad air, not by germs, not by bacteria, by bad air. And they thought it was a much more complicated explanation. The idea of cleanliness, just keep your hands clean, that's too simple. You know, we're scientists. Oh, that's too simple, it's too easy. So they just didn't believe it. The idea doctors are killing women and babies because we are killing doctors and women and babies. The doctors are killing women and babies because we're dirty, because our hands are dirty. No, impossible. That couldn't possibly happen. That's outrageous, absolutely outrageous. I will not believe it. So the doctors didn't believe it. It's a simple explanation, but the doctors would not believe it. Oh, so this Semmelweis guy, he's a fool. Don't believe him. It's nonsense. And Semmelweis heard this and he repeated the experiment. So he did the same experiment. Clean your hands, wash your hands, fewer women die. And he did it again and again. Lots of times. And it was always the same result. The number of women dying dropped. But again, doctors didn't believe him. It didn't matter how many times he did the experiment. Doctors just laughed at him. So, oh, this Semmelweis is stupid. Ignore him. He's a crazy guy. And in fact, because all the doctors were criticizing him and laughing at him, he was fired from his job. So he didn't win the Nobel Prize. In fact, he lost his job. So he wasn't a doctor anymore. He was fired from his job as a doctor. All these bad doctors kept their jobs. He got fired. And so now he's got no job. The women are dying. Babies are dying. And he's becoming angrier and angrier and angrier. Because you would do, you'd be angry, right? these doctors, they're murdering mothers and babies. He's really, really angry, and he's writing letters to people all over the place saying, you know, wash your hands. Cleanliness is important. But he got so angry, people thought he was crazy. So he's getting really, really angry. Oh, you murdering doctors. Doctors are murdering babies, murdering mothers. Terrible. Really, really angry. Because he was so angry, people thought he was crazy. And because they thought he was crazy, they put him in a mental hospital. In 1865, Ignaz Semmelweis was locked in a mental hospital. So he was locked in a mental hospital. Didn't win the Nobel Prize. He lost his job and was locked in a mental hospital. And in the mental hospital, the guards who were looking after him beat him up. So he got beaten up. All right? He didn't win the Nobel Prize. He lost his job, got locked in a mental hospital, and got beaten up. And then he got an infection in the mental hospital. He got an infection very similar to the infection that was killing the women in the hospitals. So he got an infection and he died very soon. So he didn't win a Nobel Prize. He lost his job. He was put in a mental hospital. He got beaten up and then he died of an infection. Very soon after that, Louis Pasteur, was discovered that germs, bacteria do cause infections. In fact, while Semmelweis was in the mental hospital, Louis Pasteur was already conducting experiments. And Louis Pasteur proved that germs cause diseases. So better standards of cleanliness improved medicine. So it's very important to keep clean and try to prevent the spread of germs. Semmelweis showed us. What has Semmelweis showed us? It's difficult to change people's minds. Sometimes, even if you have a very good experiment and everything's very clear and very straightforward, people will not change their minds.